Tennessee would be better off in the bowl game without their starting quarterback. Just going to let that sit for a second. If Joe Milton decides not to play or he's nudged not to play, this game becomes 100 times more interesting from a national perspective, from a Tennessee fan perspective. Be honest with me. When you are getting ready to hit that enter button, it's not about Joe being nice, but when you want to post on the message board and you're just about to hit return and think, am I being nice that I want to see Joe Milton one more time because he's a great guy and he's good for the program? But I really want to see a full month of practice and a full game with
Iamaleava.
Thank you. There is no question. And this is totally a different answer than I would have given you 10 years ago. What are the chances Joe Milton can go out there and get hurt in a bowl game? And all he's got going for him is physical attributes. If he gets hurt in a bowl game, it's going to kill him in the NFL draft. You don't want that, do you? If he goes out there and plays great, what does Tennessee get? Nothing. A win over Iowa. If he plays poorly, you're like, you remember him poorly. And it's one of the situations, unlike when Christian McCaffrey started all of this, and there was another player too. But when they started skipping the bowl game and foregoing the bowl game, people thought it was a terrible thing to do. And I thought it was very unsportsmanlike. But now I've changed my tune on that. And I think Joe Milton would be best served. I think Tennessee would be best served if he just cruised on. He can go ahead and drive up to Indianapolis now. It's not that far of a drive. And get ready for the NFL Combine if he gets invited. Or I guess he would go to Mobile first for the Senior Bowl, which he did get invited to. So what the H? Brought to you by Rick Terry Jewelry Design. They want to be your jeweler. Looking for affordable game day jewelry? How about the Fire Opals? A Tennessee tradition. RickTerryJewelry.com. RickTerryJewelry.com. Am I crazy? Just go ahead and go Nico. Just go ahead and make the move. Whether Joe has to say it or whether Josh has to say it. Somebody's got to say it.
Oh, this is so difficult for me. I've been pushing for Joe starting all year, but I'm like, you're right. It's your bowl games are now with bowl practices and early enrollees. You're already planning for next year with bowl, unless you're in the college football playoff. I mean, you really are. Dave, you and I know. Here's where this is a little bit trickier. Josh Heupel was prepping for next year during the season. You're the one who told me he was giving Nico 50-50 reps. You don't give your backup quarterback 50-50 reps if you're all in on this specific season for something. You give your starting quarterback all the first team reps, right? And this wasn't in case Milton gets hurt. This was, I want Nico to get more and more experience now for when I'm going to start him next year. His future, he's leveraged everything on Nico in the future. I said it last week, and I get what you and Jimmy Hyams were telling me that, this gets out, but you find some workaround way to get Joe Milton to opt out and make it seem like it was his idea to opt out. You bribe a couple of scouts to come in and say, hey, Joe, you come work for us in the weight room for a couple of months and we could really boost your draft stock, but you got to opt out of the bowl game. You do something like that.
It's a very touchy situation because Joe Milton is one of the fan favorite. He's one of the players' favorite players. I mean, he is a leader on the team, whether you like him or not, whether you like his leadership, which is different from Hendon Hooker. Hendon Hooker was more businesslike. Joe's more, hey, let's have a good time. Whether you like all of that or not, the one thing you don't want to do is you have this really good culture, and you don't want this really good culture to turn because you push Joe out the door. That's why it's so touchy and so difficult. A lot of things I think that I could do as a football coach as well as a lot of football coaches. This is not one that I would want any part of. I would not want to be a part of that conversation. I would let Joe Milton lead it. If he says he wants to come back, I would say, oh, great. That's awesome. But I wouldn't mean it. And I would welcome him back. Boy, if he wanted to go pro, I wouldn't lose any sleep in December.
This is the so there's two types of ways coaches lose games. One is the one you and I always talk about, the football IQ, the stupidity, just the stupidity factor where coaches just lose games. There is another one that doesn't have much to do with intelligence. It has to do with how well they connect with players and how willing players are to play hard for them and how they can, connect with them in that way. This is where, honestly, if Ed Orgeron were head coach, you'd have faith in Ed Orgeron. He'd know how to do this, right? He could convince Joe to go to the NFL and make it seem like it was his idea, and Joe would still love him and the team would still love him. Sam Pittman could do that too. And people like that. You probably know this. Before the discipline issues hit, Phil Fulmer could do that, right? He connected with players pretty darn well and had them still going all out for the program in that way.
So would it be better for Tennessee's program to go out there and, okay, let's factor in Iowa's defense, which is very good. For Nico to go out there and complete 18 of 24 passes for 260 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and lose by 3, as opposed to Joe Milton go out there and be 32 of 38, throws for 360 yards, and Tennessee wins by 14. Which would be better for Tennessee's program? A close loss with Nico or a big win with Joe?
The close loss with Nico. The reps matter. I know people say they don't believe reps in practice matter. I know last week, and Ragged.tom's going to go off on me on this, because I still say in-game action is overrated. I don't say practice reps are overrated, though. So the reps, practicing 100% of first-team reps with the team, Dave, for a whole month. That's a big deal.
No, it is. And Derek brings up a good point, protecting your investment. That's the other thing. If you don't think Joe's ready, then don't run him out there against anybody. I think Nico. And I think both of us agree with that, right? I mean, I've been told that he's been ready for about 2.5 months. So if that's the case, I would do that. Now, Smoky Mountain Red brings up an interesting point. When I say this, it will sound worse than what I mean. I feel Heupel knew this would be a transition season, and Joe was the lamb led to the slaughter with his weak offensive line. But it wasn't supposed to be weak, though, Smoky Mountain Red. Not with Cooper healthy.
It wasn't supposed to be weak at all. Josh Heupel tried to force Cooper out into practice and force him out and not have him get a procedure done because he was so scared of Cooper being hurt. We know how much he valued Cooper Mays in that way. The question is actually next year with the offensive line, not this year.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. So I don't think now he did know this was a transition year. Joe was led to be the lamb to slaughter because Joe only got 50% of first team reps. So I think there might have been, because of that, some chemistry issues at times on the quarterbacks jiving with the players. Dave, that happens all the time. Not that they don't love Joe. You can like a player, rally behind him, but because you don't have enough reps with him, you guys aren't on the same page on the field a lot of times. And I think that might have happened.
Yeah, and we got a note. Pass protection wasn't good for Tennessee. Well, I mean, Tennessee was second in the SEC in sacks allowed, so it wasn't horrible. I mean, it wasn't terrible. I thought there were times that they had issues, but especially if you take out the first couple of games where Cooper wasn't available, pass protection was pretty good.
That's skewed, though, because of all the quick screens Joe Milton threw that basically count as long runs. True. And, there were not enough downfield passes for him to get sacked. Let's be honest on that.
Agreed. I still, though, believe that if Nico had taken over 6 weeks ago, there'd be a different feel for this program. And I think there would be a different feel for this program headed into the offseason if he took over this December. And again, this is not like it used to be. 10 years ago, this is either kicking somebody out the door or this is him quitting on his team. It's viewed completely different, Caleb, than it was last year or than 10 years ago, right?
Yeah, totally different. And honestly, I think if you're not going to be back, you do your team a favor when you opt out of a meaningless bowl game. Let them get their, because the bowl games, y'all call me crazy, I throw bowl games out the window, and I've done it since, and I've gone specific. The 2006-2007 Sugar Bowl, in which LSU blew out Notre Dame, and that game alone propelled Jamarcus Russell to a first-round draft pick, or the number 1 draft pick. And I was telling everybody, Dave, you watched Jamarcus Russell against Tennessee that year, that comeback game-winning drive, which helped propel him too. That was the most overrated game-winning drive I've ever seen. Jamarcus Russell wasn't that impressive on that. And I made it very clear he's not a number 1 draft pick. And he got propelled because of the bowl game, because people constantly overvalue bowls.
Okay, so let me ask you this. What do you think will happen, if anything, with Milton and Nico?
I think Milton. I think this is going to be difficult, and I think Milton's going to play because Josh Heupel won't want to nudge the way I think he should, and I think Milton knows he probably needs another game to help his draft stock. And also, I think his eyes lit up playing Iowa because even though Iowa has a stingy defense, they're slow in the secondary. So Milton probably thinks he can get a lot of yards through the air in this game.
Okay, what could Joe Milton do to improve his draft stock in this game?
What you just said. 32 of 38 for 360 yards and 4 touchdowns. Dave, I think you're underestimating how stupid many NFL scouts are and how often many of them overvalue bowl games.
I don't think one is going to help all that much.
Again, Jamarcus Russell became a number 1 pick because of a meaningless bowl game.
Yeah, but I don't know.
That was that was ridiculous.
I just there were things I saw from Jamarcus Russell, and you brought up his name up, and it's the best comparison I can think of too. But there are things that were brought up with Jamarcus Russell where I look at and I say, well, hey, I saw some touch from him. I saw some accuracy from him. I think Joe Milton is a far less prospect in the NFL than Jamarcus Russell coming out of school. Now, we know what we know now with hindsight 2020, but would you argue with that?
Yeah, I probably would. I'm not going to lie. I probably would. I think Joe Milton actually might be a little bit better because I don't remember seeing touch with Jamarcus Russell's throws. When he tried to put touch on it, he floated it, and it was the easiest pass in the world to intercept, i.e. 05 Tennessee LSU, when LSU blew a 21-point lead, because remember that pass he floated right into Jonathan Hefney's arms?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think Hefney moved that whole play. And Jamarcus just floated it right into his arms.
That's pretty fair. I can roll with that.